My name's Scott Howell. I farm at Avoca, south of Avoca on the Avoca River. We have mainly prime lambs and I farm there with my family. About 2,000 acres. Benefit that I've received from doing pregnancy scanning is I've been able to separate the twin lambing ewes to give them extra feed to keep them up. That has led, the benefits from that are we've been able to lift our survival rate from our lambs in their twin mobs, and the bottom 20% of our lambs, our tail end of our ewes and our lambs has improved significantly. In the lead up to getting them out into their paddocks, we contain them in sacrifice paddocks and we're able to feed them there to let the feed get away. And we make sure that the appropriate paddocks for shelter, quality of feed, quantity of feed are used, not too big. In my opinion, scanning is like the first link in a chain. A lot of the other decisions you make seem to hang off that. It gives you a lot of different options from that, whatever that result is. You can have a big impact on the bottom 20% of your sheep and lambs, and it takes all the surprises out. If you've got a proper system in place of when to do things, it just takes the surprises out.
I'd like to introduce you Lee Beattie. She's an economist, agricultural consultant, scientist, got an MBA, does a bit of farming with a beef and cropping business with her husband, and also 3 kids, so busy lady. She's going to talk about pregnancy scanning and how to make it pay. And we've also got Scott Howe over here. He's a prime lamb producer from Amphitheatre near Avoca, and he's going to give you some of his practical views about doing all the things on farm. So, kick it off, Lee.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming along. Lucky last session. I think Jason Trump really set the scene for this session earlier today when he talked about the huge potential that exists in the sheep industry to increase weaning percentage. So what I'm going to talk about is show you some actual farm case study data from farms that have adopted scanning and other ewe nutrition management things like condition scoring and mob size and that kind of thing, and just show you what kind of productivity and profitability benefits those farms were able to achieve. I think I said earlier, Jason Trump, I think, set the scene really well this morning with his session, for this session, when he talked about the huge potential that exists in the sheep industry for increasing weaning percentage and production per hectare. So what I'm going to show you today is some case study farm data from some farms that have actually adopted scanning and condition scoring to show you what kind of productivity and profitability impacts that's had on their business. So the data that I'm going to show you, the case study data, comes from a project called Assessing the Impact of MLA's Southern Majority Market Program, which is basically an evaluation of the More Beef from Pastures in Southern Australia and the Making More from Sheep programs, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. It was a 3-year project that ran from mid-2011 to mid-2014. And the project involved conducting about 550 phone interviews of farmers who'd been involved in the program, and then doing 111 farm case studies. So there may well be some of you here today that were involved in that project, either as a case study farm or were interviewed, so you may be familiar with the project. So I'm just going to obviously talk about the case study evaluations. The purpose of those case study evaluations was to get some real in-depth, hard data on farms that have been making changes in different areas of the business in terms of what impact those changes have had on farm productivity, profitability, but also the environmental and animal welfare issues and the human or management side of it as well. So as you may be aware, when you attend one of these events, Making More from Sheep events, you're required to fill out one of those evaluation forms right at the end, and you're thinking, this is the last thing I want to do. And one of the questions says, what do you intend to do differently when you go away as a result of attending this workshop? And so people had made, comments on what their intended practice changes were, and then based on that evaluation data, we identified farms and contacted farmers and asked them to be involved in the project. So for the majority of those case study farms, farm financial productivity and practice change data was collected on farm. So it's quite a detailed process. And then we reconnected with those case study farmers about 12 months later, either by email or phone, basically just to catch up with them and say, okay, this is what we thought would happen or what had happened 12 months earlier when we caught up with you. What's happened since then in terms of what the results have been from the management changes you've been making? So there was 47 making more from sheep case studies done. The rest were beef. So 15 of those were in Victoria, 9 in South Australia, a couple in Tassie, a few in Queensland, 11 in New South Wales and 7 in Western Australia. So from those 47 farms, there were actually 56 separate practice changes evaluated. So some of those farms had made more than one specific kind of practice change on their business as a result of attending that Making More from Sheep event. So this graph here just shows the kinds of management changes farmers were making. So as you can see, half of them related to ewe management, about 20% to pastures, which was mainly grazing management, pasture renovation and soil fertility, so fertiliser, soil testing, that kind of thing. Then genetics was probably the next most common one, followed by animal health type changes, and then there was a few relating to marketing and changing enterprise mix. So within that 50% of ewe management category, that included farmers that changed lambing time, that began joining ewe lambs, that began flushing ewes, so with lucerne or lupins, and the rest were relating to ewe nutrition during pregnancy and lactation, so pregnancy scanning, condition scoring, feed allocation, that kind of thing. So what I've done with the data I'm going to present you is I've pulled out those ewe nutrition kind of management changes that were made out of that 50% to show you that data. So some of the case study farms started scanning, they weren't previously scanning. Some were just wet and dry scanning and they started scanning for multiples, but many of them were already scanning, and they made other changes to increase the value of that scanning to the business. So those other kind of changes that they made, because they were already scanning, mainly involved starting to condition score, setting condition score targets, and then improving the allocation of feed on offer to those different classes of ewes. Running smaller mobs of multiples. A lot of farmers had said that they were previously scanning, but they just weren't getting the weaning percentages out of their twinning mobs that they should have been getting, and they reckoned their mob size was just too big, so they reduced mob sizes and got much better results. Altering supplementation regimes if needed to better match ewe demand with feed supply, and in some cases also improving predation management to increase lamb survival, along with some of those other changes. So in terms of what costs those farmers reported, increasing labour was the big one, and that was either owner-operator labour or employed labour, to do the condition scoring, to manage the extra lambs that they were weaning, to monitor food on offer, to manage more smaller mobs if that's what they were doing, and if they were feeding more supplements, the extra labour to feed out. Not all farms were feeding more supplementary feed as part of their management change. Some were just improving the way they were allocating what feed they had. But if they did, there was an extra cost of additional supplementary feed. And of course, that's going to vary between seasons as well. Increased lamb marking and costs, and possibly lamb shearing costs for those extra lambs that were being weaned. And if they weren't previously scanning, then additional costs for the scanning. In terms of the benefits, increased weaning percentage by an average of 12% across all the farms. So that ranged from 5% to 20%. I've no doubt that those farms will probably increase that further as time goes on, as they they've just started making these changes, so they're probably going to get better at it as they go along. So there's potential there that they'll probably, on many of those farms, increase those weaning percentages further. Many farms reported reduced ewe deaths by up to 50% on some farms, due just to better ewe nutrition. Quite a few farms reported earlier lamb turn-off as a result of healthier and bigger lambs. So farmers reported between 1 and 3 weeks earlier turn-off. So that's obviously going to result in feed saved that would otherwise be consumed and or being able to lock up hay paddocks earlier than you would otherwise normally be able to. Some farms reported more uniform lambs at weaning, so less sale lots, so you're not going to have those stragglers that you're having to carry through, or more smaller mobs that for sale. So it was a lot simpler in terms of management. Lifetime wool production benefits for the merino producers in terms of increased lifetime wool cuts per head and decreased microns. For those farms that weren't previously culling, by culling scanned empties, there's huge potential to increase flock fertility over time by getting rid of those empties. Some farms were culling all scanned empties, some were giving maidens a second chance and culling the rest, so it just depended on the farm and what they wanted to do. Many farms reported, obviously a lot healthier ewes, and as a result of that, they were able to reduce the drenching requirements for the ewes per year, between 1 and 2 drenches, some farmers reported. So, that can add up to pretty big dollar savings over, big ewe numbers. Labour saved. Many farms that were already condition scoring had said that were already scanning, but not condition scoring, said that in retrospect their single ewes were just too overweight, and so they'd had big problems with dystrochia and lamb deaths and ewe deaths. So there's a lot of labour saved by reducing the single condition score of single bearing ewes. So in terms of quantifying those benefits, sheep enterprise gross margin per DSE, on average those farms were generating an additional $1.86 per DSE, ranging from an extra 30 cents to an extra $4.80. On a per hectare basis, sheep gross margin per hectare was $18 higher, ranging from $4 to $51. On a whole farm basis, extra whole farm gross income per hectare was $19, ranging from about $5 to $50. Much smaller range in terms of the extra whole farm costs associated with the management changes, only $5, ranging from -5 to +15. And over the whole farm, extra whole farm profit for these farms as a result of these management changes was $14 per hectare, ranging from about 4 to 40. Change in total return on total farm capital on average was 0.4%. Over a big asset base, that can end up being a reasonable number, and it ranged from +0.1% up to +1.2%. So over the whole farm, on average, these farms were able to generate an extra $9,500 per farm in annual profit as a result of these ewe nutrition management changes they'd made. And that ranged from a bit over $3,000 up to $30,650. So that's obviously going to depend on the scale of your business as well. So that's the profitability. This is the productivity. So these percentage figures show the annual percentage growth in productivity of the business, which is basically the ratio of the quantity of outputs used to the quantity of outputs generated relative to the quantity of inputs used to generate that output. So the first line, 0.2%, is the sheep industry average annual productivity growth from 1977-78 up to 2012-13, and that's an ABARES figure. So just for comparison, the long-term average decline in annual terms of trade is about 1.7%. So basically farmers need to be earning or generating an annual gain in productivity growth of at least 1.7% to just be, even, to be not going backwards. So basically it's not an option to stand still. You have to keep improving your productivity just to keep up with those declining terms of trade. So as you can see, that industry average of 0.2 is a fair way below that 1.7 that's required. The second line shows the annual productivity growth that all the case studies we did, including the pastures and genetics ones, all of them, what productivity benefits those farmers were able to make as a result of these practice changes they'd made. So that was 2.3%, which is way, way above the 0.2. And then the last line shows just the ewe nutrition management case studies that we've pulled out. they were generating annual productivity growth of 4.2%, which again is almost double the rest of the farms that were making practice changes. And that 2.3 includes those new nutrition case studies. So if we take them out of that, the difference is going to be even bigger. So basically that just shows you the massive potential for improving farm productivity, even for farms that are already pregnancy scanning, by just, adding in condition scoring and improved feed allocation. So in addition to looking at the productivity and profitability impacts of these changes on farms, we also looked at environmental impacts, which I haven't shown today. But we also looked at the human or management kind of impacts and animal welfare impacts. So what this graph shows you, we asked the farmers to rate the impact of the changes they'd made, what the impact they'd had on these variables on the left, and then we asked them to score that from +3, high positive impact, through 0 to -3, high negative impact. So the orange lines here is neutral, no impact. Anything to the left is positive, and the red to the right is a negative impact. So you can see, not surprisingly, there's a huge positive impact on animal welfare. Less dead lambs, healthier ewes, less dead ewes. That's not surprising. Nearly all farms reported a really positive impact of making the changes on the risk scenario of their business. A couple said neutral impact, but they were recognising that in a year where there's a poor spring, they're going to have more lambs to carry through, or feedlot or whatever, but that was outweighed by the benefits in the good years over the long term. They were actually way better off in terms of risk. Complexity, 50-50. Some farms said the new system was more complex because there was more labour required, I guess, more mobs to manage. Others said, well, it was less complex because they had a better handle on the business and more control over it, so they knew what they were doing. Big increases in skills and knowledge, even bigger increases in confidence. A lot of farmers said before they made this change that they felt like they knew what they had to do, but it was attending these making more from sheep courses that gave them the confidence to actually go and do it and just make a start. Stress levels, a big change there. Vast majority of farmers reported that as a result of making these management changes, their stress levels had reduced. They were feeling better about what they were doing. Work-life balance, a few negatives there, due mainly to the increased workload, but others said even though it was an increased workload, they felt like they were less stressed and worried about it, so they were able to switch off a bit better when they were away from the farm and relax more. They weren't thinking about it all the time and worrying, so they felt it was a positive outcome. So in terms of the non-dollar human impacts, just a few quotes from some of the farms. I find it a much less stressful way to manage my ewes. I know the exact nutritional requirements of every ewe on the property, and this helps me to make much better and much earlier decisions if the season begins to look like an ordinary one. So it's just having that control over the business. I feel better about less dead ewes and lambs to pick up. I feel like I'm now doing a better job of my management. It's nice to look at sheep in good condition. You know, when you go around a mob, it's always the weak and sick ones you see first, and, it doesn't make you feel too good. So certainly that was something that was said. And one guy said, look, just the personal satisfaction at being able to make the new system work, just that feeling of pride and sense of achievement. Just a couple of others. Mental health, that's a big issue with everyone. The benefit to my mental health from improved animal welfare for both ewes and lambs, as so many more fetuses are now converted to lambs weaned. So that's exactly what Jason was talking about this morning. It's less stressful to run my ewes at the correct condition score throughout the year. Having condition score targets allows for better, more proactive decision making. I think that's what it's all about. This change has given me greater control over my business and the ability to make decisions and manipulate stocking rates to any season. So there's just a few examples of some comments that farmers had made about, I guess, how to make them feel as managers and, particularly in relation to the animal welfare. So just in terms of conclusions, clearly pregnancy scanning can return large productivity and profitability benefits to sheep enterprises. There are huge opportunities on many farms who may already be scanning to make better use of scanning data to increase productivity and profitability by just using condition scoring, setting targets and allocating feed to meet demand. And also, as I said, mob sizes, predation, all those other issues that come into play. It's great to scan and separate singles from multiples, but you can't manage ewe nutrition properly if you don't measure it. You're flying blind. So you need to measure it and set targets and then provide the required nutrition to be able to meet those targets. As we know, it's one thing to get the lambs on the ground and another to ensure maximum lamb survival to weaning. So as a lot of farms did, they reduced mob size to decrease mismothering, improved predation management, provided paddocks with shelter, and of course ewe nutrition is the key to keep those lambs growing. It's not all about the money. Money will buy you a good bed, but not a good night's sleep. I think we all know that. Significant non-dollar benefits can result from reduced stress for the farmer due to more confidence and control over the system and picking up less dead lambs and ewes. Certainly positive feelings of personal achievement and pride in successfully making positive improvements to how the business is being run. And this sort of stuff is not often reported or talked about. It's usually the economic data of these kinds of things is shown, but this project has shown there's clearly a lot of, positive feelings from the farmers about what they were doing and what they were achieving. So that's important to acknowledge, I think.